Welcome. And welcome to Los Angeles, for those of you who are from other places. We're not actually in Los Angeles, we're in Pasadena. And if you came up from Los Angeles, you may not have noticed the point at which you left Los Angeles and entered Pasadena. If you're from other parts of the country, you may still harbor the quaint 19th century illusion that cities are supposed to actually be separated by farmland and meadows. We're much more enlightened here in Southern California, thanks to the wisdom and benevolence of our city planners. Our cities, and there are many of them, if you went to the beach you would go to at least 5 of them, our cities kind of nestle up against each other, sort of like kissing cousins. And if you think that's urban sprawl, you're wrong. It's part of a very carefully thought out urban design. We like our transitions to be, between our cities, to be as subtle and as delicate as the transitions between our seasons. It's all very So here in Southern California, when our summer gently rolls into winter, our temperature plummets from 83 degrees to 73 degrees, and that's drastic enough change for us.
That's true.
We like to string our towns. You'll see this when you drive around as you go to cities, different theaters around. We string our towns along with sort of endless boulevards of dreams that extend all the way to the sea. And they're lined with Nordstroms and Jamba Juices and El Pollo Locos as far as the eye can see. Ladies and gentlemen, you have arrived in paradise. And you are here to hone your skills in the vibrant profession of arts journalism. God, what were you thinking? Don't you have at least some friends who told you what was going on? The word freefall means nothing to you. To quote from Mr. Fleck's performance for a moment, side effects of our profession may include paranoia, delusions of security, loss of appetite, rage, ennui, morbid depression, obsessive blogging, inexplicable desire to brush up on barista skills, recurring dreams prominently featuring images of the Titanic. There is hope for our profession. Seriously, the NEA wouldn't have thrown its resources into a lost cause, and journalism in general and arts journalism in particular are far from being lost causes. They are professions that are obviously undergoing tectonic shifts, and they are in danger of rolling off a cliff into a terminal fall. And among our purposes here is to try to conjure, fathom some kind of idea or even a plan of how we can prevent this from happening. The first part of this search is to diagnose candidly what really happened, why we're in this mess. And it would be sort of comfortable to think, well, we're hurting so much because this is all part of the natural evolution of technology, sort of the way, I don't know, the invention of the printing press rendered the scroll obsolete, or movies with sound rendered silent films obsolete, or the way the cell phone rendered the public telephone obsolete, or the way internet porn has rendered the Pussycat Theater chain obsolete. Things like that to sort of move society on into a better place. Wouldn't it be comforting to think that the seeming obsolescence of our print media was also part of a natural and healthy evolution? I don't believe that for a moment, and probably you don't either. I'm not convinced that the print media is as obsolete as it's reported. I teach World Theater course out in California State University in San Bernardino, which is in the hinterland about an hour east of here, and this is a general population of students. They're 18 to 22-year-olds. They're not specialists in any way. They're brought from the general population of the university. And I asked them, I said, how many of you get your information from the world, from print, from what, not online, but what's written at least once a week, and 90% of them raise their hand. And that evidence was corroborated by a colleague from another newspaper, Backstage, the editor of Backstage, said she had done that also, to ask the same question to a class she was speaking at a junior college on the other side of the region, and got the same results. So in terms of reports that we young aren't reading newspapers, perhaps we who work in the newspaper business should be a little more skeptical about what we read in the newspapers. We should certainly be more skeptical about what we write. The real cause of the crisis in our profession stems not so much from changing reading habits or changing technologies or even shifts in advertising trends, which our newspapers could have endured had they remained locally owned. The real crisis of our newspapers stems from the fact that so many of our media outlets were purchased by chains in speculative investments that were leveraged on unsustainable debt. And that's what we're all paying for through the euphemisms of efficiency and cost cutting. It simply makes no sense to save a paper by laying off its most distinguished writers and editors. It makes no sense to save a newspaper by shutting down its fact-checking department and curtailing its copy editing departments. It makes no sense to save a newspaper by shuttering its foreign bureaus and by shredding the teams of reporters that once exposed layers of corruption in city governments and state governments, in federal governments, as we learned today. It makes no sense to save a newspaper by eliminating its arts coverage or by syndicating 3 editorials around the country as though we live in an echo chamber. It's one thing for Denny's to use the same pancake recipe to serve up pancakes in Beaumont, Texas, and Buffalo, New York. But because a pancake is a pancake pretty much anywhere around the world. But in newspapers are not pancakes, and yet they're being served up that way around the country as though they are. We don't need to imprison or murder our journalists on some road to despotism, like they do in Russia and North Korea. All we have to do is continue doing business the way we've been doing it for the last 5 years, and the result will be exactly the same. All this stems from a larger theology built on a huge false premise that short-term profits serve a higher value than long-term service. This has been a business model that's been around in this country for at least 2 decades, beyond journalism, obviously in the housing market and in the auto industry. It's been a kind of self-imploding theology. And thank goodness it's now in flames, because from the ashes we can build a new business model, and part of why we're here is to imagine what that business model might look like. If the future of journalism is going to be online, then a model must be found to lift the online reportage from its current mire of yellow journalism and return it to the standards that were built so fastidiously over decades in the print journalism, standards that are now being decimated. And by those standards, I'm talking about the unscalable wall between advertising and editorial, the unscalable wall between a journalist and their potential conflict of interest, and of course, the resources to actually pay journalists and teams of journalists to investigate in depth what on earth is going on in our communities behind the drone of the public relations machines and the doublespeak of policymakers. And don't think for a minute that arts writing is any less vital than hard news coverage. Our artists who are worth their salt, and they are in abundance, from our actors through the details of their approach to a character, our singers through the richness of their voices, our directors and playwrights, and our choreographers and designers, through the clarity of the worlds they create. They're trying to find and express some kind of truth that can't be expressed in any other form. And that's our job too, is to tell the truth of their endeavors, so that they can be broadcast beyond their community of artists and friends and family and out into a larger world where their work deserves to be discussed with intelligence and respect. Our job is actually to stand shoulder to shoulder with those artists even when we're critiquing them, actually especially when we're critiquing them, to stand with them like one of Shakespeare's clowns on the wall, on the garden wall between the king's palace, and the forest beyond. Because if we're in the royal palace, we can't speak the truth because we may get hanged for it, or we may get too close to royalty. And we can't really speak the truth from the forest, or we can, but it won't be heard. We need to be there with the artist on that wall, on that divide between power and exile, deciphering their riddles and their jokes and their songs and their dances and their satires and their parodies, and broadcasting to the larger world whatever they have to offer that's meaningful. The inability or the reluctance by any of us to tell the truth, for whatever reason, whether it's from lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of desire, or whether it's from fear of offending some editor or some imagined subscriber base or some imagined readership, the inability or reluctance of any of us to tell the truth is the single greatest threat to journalism, as it is the single greatest threat to the arts, as it is the single greatest threat to a democratic and open society. And that's really the crisis we face as these newspapers keep trying to cut their way to prosperity. Welcome to Los Angeles. In this tempest of uncertainty, let's work together to try and reinvigorate this wounded profession of ours. Thank you so very much.